All right. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Hi, Maxi. How are you
Hello,
doing?
guys.
All right. So, hi, everyone. I hope you're all staying safe, staying positive and home. Um, well, as you know, we have our special guest Maxi here. He's a senior engineer from Google. He was introduced to me by through Raquel, which is our club's counselor, and also the president of the E-Club of Silicon Valley. So we are very honored to present Maxi to you all today. And yeah, Maxi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. First of all, let me start by saying thank you for inviting me. I I also always like to talk with Rotaractors. I was a Rotaractor myself for like 7 years. I'm originally from Argentina, and when I was back in Argentina, I was part of Rotaract, and it was an amazing experience for me. And then when I finished university, I got an offer to come to Google. So I have been living in the Bay Area for the last 5 years now. And as you said, I'm an engineer. I work for the Gmail team. Um, I'm mostly on the front end. I'm a technical lead on the infrastructure, front end infrastructure team. And I'm in the team that recently launched the next generation Gmail, and where we integrated a bunch of things inside Gmail. So a bit more relaxed now that we finished that launch. And what else? Yeah, I'm a member of the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley. In the board of directors, and my role this year is the chair of the Rotary Foundation Committee for my club, which is basically the committee that is looking to fundraise for our different service projects. So I'm learning a lot, and yeah, happy to be here.
Great. Shall we start with some of our questions?
Yeah, so I think I want this to be like a quite informal environment, if you wish. I'm probably like uh, mostly your age, guys, like, or 5 years older, maybe, I don't know. So I'm hoping that we can just relax. If you want to turn your cameras on, so I don't look at the screen with names, that would be awesome. And then yeah, we can start with some of the questions. I have the list, and I think as I'm talking, you guys can of course ask more questions, and we'll see how it goes. As I told you before, I have like half an hour before I go grab dinner, and I need to prepare for another presentation that I need to do tomorrow to my team. So yeah, I have the questions here in my phone, and if you guys want, we can start with that, and then we'll see um, where where that goes. That sounds good.
Sounds perfect. Go ahead then.
Yeah. So I think the first question is, what would you recommend a 19-year-old student to prepare to achieve what you did so far? It's an interesting one. I think for me, uh, professionally, my achievement, I would say, is uh, first graduating in university from computer science, which is something I really love and I'm very passionate, and then getting a job at a company like Google. So if we talk about those two, I think for me it was fundamental to understand what my passion was very early on when I was like in high school. Um, and my passion was around technology and programming and building websites and basically making the computer do whatever I wanted to do. So I started really young. When I was 15, I started building websites, and then my first my first website was for a Rotarian from my club back in Argentina, and then I also built a bunch of websites for my district. So I think I think the general recommendation would be try to find your passion and and try to not get influenced by others, but instead try to figure it out. um, because I mean there are a lot of preconceptions depending on where you're from. Some people will say, yeah, you need to study or engineer, or you have to be a doctor or a lawyer. And these days there is a lot of flexibility on what you can do, right? And there is access to information, so you should try. And I always call it like the startup method of fail fast, because you might think that you like to program, but then maybe you give it a try. You try a class in Coursera, and then you fear that it's not what you really thought it was, and then you realize that maybe you like the design part of building a product more than the coding part. Or you like the process organization of launching a product more than the actual coding. So in each field there are so many variants or so many roles of things that you can do. So I would suggest that you brainstorm on what you really like, and you give it a try, and don't be afraid of saying, oh, okay, actually I was wrong. I have many friends who were not right on the first try, and they're working for me with me at Google, but at the beginning they were studying something completely different. And even people that I have friends who studied math, pure math or pure physics, but then they realized that they didn't like they like math and they liked physics, but they enjoy a lot more building products and delivering value to users. So they learn how to code, and of course, because they have the foundations from doing a really hard career like math, that they could easily switch and learn something new. So yeah, if you are starting university, um, or if you are going to start soon, then I would say you should reflect carefully about your choices. But then again, like, don't be afraid to to fail and try something else. The importance here is to keep trying, and to not say, oh, okay, I try, it didn't work out. Now I I will give up and I will not study anything. I will just do whatever someone else tells me to do. Um, so that will be my first answer to that one. Um, do you guys have any comments or follow-ups?
So, when you studied in the university, did you already know you wanted to study computer science or something related to that?
Oh yeah. So to me, it was very evident. I started coding when I was 11 or 12. I did a lot of programming competitions. And so to me, actually, the last 2 years of high school, I was already like, I cannot keep studying these things. I really want to go to university and just spend all my day studying computer science. But sometimes it's not that evident. And sometimes it takes longer to realize what you really like. So, but yeah, for me, as I said, like, I started learning on my own. I competed, participated in all these competitions, and then I started building websites and earn a bit of money to, I don't know, buy stuff, buy my first computers and things like that. And honestly, at the time, when I started coding, I didn't have a computer at home. I didn't have internet. I didn't have a cell phone, and I didn't have a laptop. So it was quite challenging for me to actually learn. I had a lot of books, but then I had to go to my high school, to the lab to actually have like some hours of coding. I think these days is a lot easier, because I mean there is information everywhere. There are a lot of classes to build your Android app or your iPhone app, and also technology has become cheaper uh, to so you can access like a decent computer that you can build a lot of really cool things at a very low price. So then I when I went to university, I did computer science, and it was pretty obvious for me that I needed to pursue that career. Um, yeah.
So, wow, you started competing coding when you were about what, 15?
I was 12 when I started competing. these competitions are like all over the world. um, I can send you the link later if you guys are interested. And
Yeah, sure.
those were programming competitions for, like, you had to, like, you're given a problem and you have to solve it with an algorithm. But today there are a lot of other versions of that competition. You have robotics, you have game competitions, like where you have to build a game like in 24 hours. Because again, like inside computer science, you also have like 1,000 different options of things to do, right? Like you might want to be a security engineer, and then there are competitions to break or try to break into like a particular piece of software. There are competitions that where you have to build a game in 24 hours. There are competitions where you have to build a startup and your product in a weekend. I did a lot of them. There are like robotic competitions where you're given a prototype with some commands, and then you have to program the robot to fight with another robot. So there are a lot of really fun things out there. When I started, I mean, these competitions were mostly algorithms, so it was like math essentially. But I really liked it. But yeah, you guys should, if you're interested in computer science, then you can try all these different things and see what really motivates you, and you realize, because you then spend 10 hours in the computer without doing anything else, and that means like you're probably very passionate about it.
Okay, so we have a question here on the
Yeah.
chat.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, some topics are harder than others, right? And sometimes the intuitions don't come um, uh, when you first read something. It's like, I think I understood this, and then you try to apply it, and you didn't understand it. So I have found different resources to overcome this. Um, First is YouTube. I usually, like, so you can read a book on algorithms, right? But sometimes, like, if you don't have anyone to explain to you, some things are really tricky. But in YouTube, you have all these guys that they record videos about different topics, and then you can learn almost anything. So YouTube has been very good source. Then there is a Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is a website where programmers basically they put everything there, and there is a joke that these days people program with like an IDE in one side with their code, and then a Stack Overflow next to it, because you don't memorize everything. You just like go Stack Overflow it. Yeah. So I would say that one is a second really good resource. And then sometimes it's just being patient. Some topics are more complicated than others, and sometimes you have to try again and try again until you get this aha moment where you say, oh, okay, I got it, this is how this works. And that happens to me even today. Like I keep learning all the time. And sometimes I have, like, in my role, I have to read documents, a lot of documents from other people building systems, and I have to go review them. And sometimes there are systems I have no idea how they work, and I read it once, it's like, oh, I don't think I got this thing. And then like 2 days later, I'll try again, and it's still okay. And sometimes you cannot, like, because Google has a lot of internal technologies, like it's not something you can just like go to Stack Overflow and get an answer, right? But sometimes I found that it's a matter of patience. Just like come back and come back and come back, and at some point your brain does like this click, and it's like, okay, now I understand. Um, and sometimes you can even get partial knowledge or partial understanding, and that's enough to get your job done. Like you don't need to go really really deep on every topic. And that's a skill that you learn as you go, because if you want to go super super deep in every topic, it takes you forever to do any project, right? So sometimes you will say, okay, I'll want to build this Android app, but I don't know, like if I need a map, I don't want to become an expert on, I don't know, geopositioning or like rendering things in a map. I will just use a library, understand the API and the basics, and then just use it. And then if you want to really go deeper, you can do it, but then you'll be stuck learning that for a month, and then your app will be a month later, right? So that's I think a skill that comes with experience, is like understanding how deep you go, and when do you think is like enough to get something done.
All right, great one there. Let's talk about interviews and internships, the interesting part. So, what recommendation would you give us as students from De Anza College? We are now sophomore students
Mhm.
and we are looking for internships. What recommendation would you give us?
Are you guys all studying computer science, or?
Yeah, we're all computer science students. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. So few tips. So for the internships, there is a website. What is the name? Leadcode.com, I think, um, where you can get all the programming internship, programming interviews programs, problems. Most companies in the Bay Area will have an interview process where they will give you a problem, and then you will have to code something to solve it, and then you will have to explain how you are solving it, right? um, so my recommendation is make sure you take an algorithms class. Like you should learn what I don't know, a stack, a queue, a tree, a graph, those data structures you need to know. And if you took that class like 2 semesters ago, you should review it for the interview, because if the interviewer asks you, okay, can you tell me how do you find, if you start in a particular node in a graph and you need to find the shortest path from point A to B, how do you do it? And if you take a computer science like algorithm class, you will learn that. But maybe you don't remember because you took the final exam like a year ago. So you need to like refresh your mind, um, because the interview will ask you these kind of questions. So definitely prepare for the interviews like a month or two in advance. Like try to like review all these topics. Um, Practice the problems that you can find in lead code. I will send you all the links after this meeting, but lead code, and there is this book called Cracking the Code Interview and Programming Interview Exposed. Those are the two books I studied when I did my Google interviews. And they are amazing because you have like easy problems, medium problems, and hard problems, and you have the explanations. And so once you do like a lot of these exercises, you should try um, to do them in an interview context. So in many cases, the interview will be, they will give you like a text note, um, a, a place to write your code, but it doesn't have all the autocomplete and all the fancy features and syntax highlighting that you get in your IDE, right? So you need to practice with that, because if you are used to like typing really fast because the IDE just auto completes everything, then you will suffer that in the interview. So you need to practice like, okay, I pick a random problem, I put it in the screen, and then I start coding. And then what you will be asked to do while you're coding, you need to explain what you're doing, right? You cannot just like code and get to the end and say, I'm done, right? You need to say, okay, I'm going to create this for loop because I want to iterate through each element. And then for each element, I will apply this operation. And then you like code whatever operation you're doing. And you say, okay, this operation, I will move to a helper function because I want to make the code clean. So you explain that, right? So you're explaining while you're coding, and that is not something that you usually do because sometimes you're coding alone, right? And this is something that is not that natural. So you need to practice so you can do both things at the same time. And with that, I would say um, interviewers are generally, at least at Google, they are generally trying to help you. Like it's not that we want you out. We actually want to help you to have a good experience on your interview. So I do a lot of interviews, and if you are explaining me what you're doing, I can follow your line of reasoning. So if you get stuck, I might ask you a question, say, okay, why don't you look at this? And that question might unblock you, and then you can continue. You see, so that's important that you're explaining what you're doing so I can understand what you're thinking about. Um, so um, that's for the interviews. I would also recommend doing uh, peer interviews. So Vincent, for example, you can like interview Hawk. Just pick a random problem. Don't pick a hard one. Just like take the book and pick a medium problem and put it in the screen, explain it to him, and then do the interview. And then you can give him feedback about, hey, look, when you were doing this, maybe you can explain this better because I did not understand what you were doing, and then vice versa. And you guys can, between the six of you, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, you can like do cross interviews to practice. um, so that's on interviews. Now the question is, how do you get the interview, right? And for that, you need to have an updated resume. For companies in the Bay Area, the recommendation is to have just a one pager, no more than that. We don't want to know everything about your life. We just need one page explaining what you have done and what you have accomplished on the projects that you have worked on. Now you might say, okay, but I am still a student, so I don't have like a lot of work experience, and that's fine because most students, when they apply for internships, they haven't done a lot of work. But maybe you did a project, I don't know, in the class around databases where you had to implement an API to communicate with the database. So you can put there, hey, academic experience, I took these classes that are related to computer science. And in this class, I don't know, databases 101, I implemented this system, and this is what I did. And you put a small paragraph explaining what you did, right? And then with that, we can see that you actually know what you're talking about, right? So highlighting the different classes that you took and what you have learned that is relevant to computer science on them, on each of them, that's important. uh, the second thing is, if you have done any programming competitions or any hackathons or any, remember the competitions I mentioned, like the robotic competitions or the security competitions, any of those are really good to mention. If you have any personal projects, let's say you're building your own like to-do app, or you're building your, I don't know, your, some family member needs a website and you build it, all those things are relevant. You should put them there. Then you can have a section around uh, community contributions, or things that are not strictly related to computer science, and that's where you put Rotaract and the community service that you're doing. And that's also important because like when you join a company, it's not only about what you know, how to what you know, is also who you are. Like, do you really care about others? And all things related to soft skills are also very important. So if you have been, I don't know, the president of the club, or if you were part of some other organization, you should mention it there. And then you can also mention if you're passionate about any sports, or I don't know, any hobbies you have. That's also good to mention there. And then any awards or distinctions, like if you were, uh, I don't know, if you won any prize or science fair or anything like that, then you should mention it as well. Just make sure that you don't exaggerate what you have done. Don't put that you're an expert on a topic when you really aren't, because interviewers will read your resume and they will ask you about, hey, can you explain me this? So for example, when I applied for Google, I started Google as an intern, and I did 2 technical interviews, which were basically, as I explained before, a problem and I had to solve it. But my third interview, the interviewer actually asked me about my Rotary experience, because in my resume I had like a big section on Rotary because I have done so many things, Like I was in Interact and Rotaract, and inside Rotaract I was the charter president, and I was also a trainer, and then I took a lot of like different positions in the club. So I explained all these things, and this guy was like, okay, can you tell me more about this? Why are you spending so much time? And I explained him all the activities I did with my club, and most of the interview was actually talking about that. um, so anyways, this doesn't mean that you should just like spend half of your resume putting Rotaract things, but if you have done anything relevant, just include it. Rotaract or any other organizations, right? um, and then what else? Yeah, and then the other thing is look for, there are some templates online that are very simple to read, right? Like some people go fancy and they put like crazy colors and like their picture, and I don't know, like just keep it simple. This is like a black and white, your name, your phone number, your studies, your like professional experience, and your, like as I say, like hobbies and other activities and awards and distinctions, bullet points for each thing, very straightforward to read, not a lot of text. And if you have job experience, then you should put your role and what impact you had. For example, if you were like, I don't know, a junior engineer at some company, or you did a previous internship already, then you can say, okay, I work here, and I did this project which was about building a dashboard that then was used by, I don't know, 20 engineers to make decisions, and that saved them 10 hours a week, right? So you're saying, this is what I did, this is the impact it had, or this is the problem I was given, this is why it is hard, and this is how I solve it, right? So those things show that you actually understood what you're doing, and that you know what you're talking about. Cool. Any other questions?
Great. Thanks for all that advice. It's so valuable. We are all planning to apply to internships right now, so that those tips for our resume are really important.
Cool. I think you're muted, Vincent.
Vincent, you're muted.
I'm sorry. So thank you for all that advice. That's very valuable tips for our resume, since we're all trying to apply into internships right now for next year, fall 2021.
Okay.
And yeah, so now we want to know more about your job as an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
So is it like 80% debugging and then 20% coding? How's the percentage of what you do at Google? How is
Yeah.
it divided?
So these days, I think I told you at the beginning, I am a technical lead on Gmail web infrastructure. And as a technical lead, I don't code a lot anymore. My role is mostly mentoring other engineers and reviewing their code and reviewing their documents and deciding where the direction of the team and what projects to do. So I have to read a lot. I sometimes write code for prototypes just to show people, okay, this is how I think we should do it. Um, but when I started at Google, I remember I spent hours and hours coding. I had less meetings than I do today. Like these days, I have a lot of meetings because I need to talk with a lot of people and figure out how to do things. But when I started, I have really few meetings and I spend most of my time coding. Now, how much did I debug versus code? I don't know. It's hard to tell, but I can tell you that because we were writing like production quality code, that this code was going to be executed by 1 billion users in Gmail, we had to write a lot of tests, which is very different from the code that you write in the university, right? That you like just hack something together and then you get the result and that's it. So here the code that you write has to be very well documented. You need to put comments on how this thing is working and why do you decide to do certain way. You need to follow a certain style. Like you, when you have your code, someone else will review it to make sure that they understand. And you always get feedback. Hey, can you rename this variable and put, because we're all really bad at naming variables, right? So like all that, you get this feedback loop where you enhance your code. So I would say you spend a lot of time coding, not necessarily the main code, but also like improving that code and writing tests for that code, unit tests, integration tests, and end-to-end tests. So testing is quite important. And by the way, for the interviews, you should be familiar with concepts around testing, because many interviews will ask you, okay, you solve this problem, how do you test it? How will you test it, right? So and then what usually happens, at least on Gmail, is that you submit your code, right? And then eventually it gets picked up by some users, usually the team first. It doesn't go to all the users at once. That would be bad. Um, and then your team starts using what you have done, and someone finds a bug, and then you have to go debug what is going on. They say, I click the button and it's not working, and you say, well, I'm clicking it and it works. So then you need to like sit down with that person and go through the code and say, okay, the button is not working because your screen is too small, and then when the screen is small, there are certain conditions that happen, and now your button is not working. So that's when you do the debugging. Sometimes it's very easy to know what's wrong, and sometimes it can take days. Like I have been dealing with some problems that took us like 2 weeks to understand. And sometimes it's like you need to put more instrumentation and more logs, more debugging logs to understand what is going on. And then you submit the code, and that code gets into production, and then users will go through the new code. So you get more information, and with that you get a better signal to debug. Because when you're debugging, the thing that makes your life easier, if you can reproduce the problem, right? If you can reproduce the problem, then you can start like going line by line. When you reproduce the problem, you go line by line to understand where things are failing. But if you cannot reproduce it, then it's more complicated, right? Because you don't even know where to start. But someone might say, okay, once a week I can reproduce this case, and I don't know why. So those are the harder ones, and those take forever to debug. And yeah, last week we were dealing with one of these kind of crazy things, and we spent almost a week trying to understand what was going on, and until we figured it out. Um, but yeah, it depends. It also depends on the project. Sometimes if you're building an internal tool, then it gets less usage, so you don't care that much about having all the quality. But if you're doing something external, or that is serving an external purpose, then you need to be more rigorous.
Right. Great, Maxi. Thank you so much. I see that your time has come. You need
Oh,
to.
really? Wow, that was fast. Let's do 10 more minutes. I can stay 10 more minutes. I'm not starving yet, but yeah, let's do 10 more minutes. And otherwise, we can do like over email some of these last questions.
Mhm. All right. Then let's go ahead and read out another question. So, a question about how stressful it is to be a software engineer. So, we heard that you code for hours and hours. Do you think that that is manageable?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on you most of the time. Like you can have a really good work-life balance if you are working for companies in the Bay Area. Companies here are usually quite sensitive about this topic, and they want you to be healthy. They want you to not spend weekends coding and doing things for work. So, but then it depends on you. Like sometimes you're very passionate about your project and you really want to keep working, but usually your mentor or your manager will try to like uh, help you find that balance where you feel that you're getting productive and you're delivering the code without like burning out. Now, of course, there are situations that are stressful, usually before launching a new feature. let's say you're building a new button, and your button is like already submitted and people are using it, and now you want to do a launch to everyone, so everyone will see it. So the weeks before that might be a bit stressful because you're like getting ready and making sure that all the details are figured out. And I mean, I was in this position like a few weeks ago when we were launching the new version of the next generation Gmail. Like, it was a huge launch. So even though I have done launches in the past, I was a bit stressed because there are so many things that could go wrong and so many details to figure out. But in general, I think you can keep a really good work-life balance, and it's not stressful overall.
What about the deadline? So what type of deadlines do you have?
Yeah, so that would depend on the company. I think at Google we work, it's a goal oriented. So in general, what happens is you would discuss with your manager uh, what the project assignment is for you and what are the time expectations, and you're expected to deliver in that period of time, but it's usually really reasonable. That's something that you discuss with your manager. Will know, okay, this person is new to the team, maybe they will take a bit longer because they have to learn the technologies. If you have been in the team for like quite a while, you already know how to get these things done, so maybe say, okay, this will take 2 weeks or 3 weeks. um, Most of the times, at least in my team, the deadlines are self-imposed. Like, we say, okay, we want to launch this in September, so let's work hard to get it. But if we, instead of September, launch a bit later, like early October, it's fine. It's not ideal because you have promised September, but it's fine. Some other times you do have like hard deadlines, like if there is a Google I/O, for example, or like a conference, and you need to show your thing at the conference, then conference date cannot change. So those are a bit more stressful, and we try to avoid having like projects that are attached to a particular date, because many things can go wrong, and it's not great to be in a position where you say, okay, we actually won't show this because we didn't finish it. But again, it depends on the company. It depends on the manager. Some managers are more strict with deadlines. Some others are more mindful.
So I'm just curious, as a software engineer like you, how many programming languages have you learned so far and remember right now?
I started learning Basic and Pascal. Those are the two languages I learned first. Then I learned C++, PHP. Then I learned, when I started university, I had a class on logic programming, and I learned Prolog. Then I learned functional programming in Haskell, and then OKM. I don't know how the name is in English. I don't, doesn't matter. Then Octave, which is the same as MATLAB. Then I learned Python. I learned a little of assembly, so that's already 11. Then Java, JavaScript, TypeScript, well, CSS and HTML. Um, and then inside Google, we have a few languages that we use for configuration. So I've learned those. So maybe, I don't know, 15. No, I don't remember all of them right now, but if I spend like a few days, I will just pick them up again. Um, so yeah, you, you learn a lot. Every year is something new, and depending on the project, or the problem that you're trying to solve, you might learn a different language. That's why it's important to learn the fundamentals of computer science, because then you can swap from one language to the other, and you will start finding that, oh, all languages are similar in this sense, but this one is different in this particular aspect, right?
Yeah, because sometimes it's hard, for example, to go from C++ to Python, right? Because Python has so many Pythonic algorithms and different ways to code the same thing. So yeah, it's hard to transition from one language to another. How do you manage to remember everything, or do you just go and Google
Yeah,
sometimes when you?
I don't remember all of them. I just rely on the IDE and Stack Overflow, honestly, because many times what happens is I'm coding like 90% of the time in, or maybe 70% of the time in one language, 25% of the time in another language. So those two, I remember everything. But then 5% of the time, there is a third language that I code like once a month. So I don't remember that. So I would just like let the IDE autocomplete or just a Stack Overflow. How do you do this? And copy. And it comes with practice, I think. Um, you can like swap between one language and the other without problem. Um, the important part is like different languages, like they have some common things, and then there are like very specific uh, things that they have built for that particular language, and you need to understand those differences, and that makes it easier to swap between one and the other.
All right. So if no one has any other questions for Maxi, then we shall end this meeting. So anyone has any other questions? Nope. All right. Then thank you, Maxi, for all your advice, sharing your experience as a Google software engineer. We appreciate you today for being with us, and we hope to be able to have another meeting with you next time. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, guys. I enjoy the time here, and I wish you the best. And hopefully, you get an internship and you start getting some real world experience. And uh, Vincent, I will send you some links on that email so you can share with the other guys here. Yeah, good luck with that, and nice to meet you.